Christian slowly opened the door and walked towards his wife's bedroom. His heart was beating fast, and he felt a little nervous. For the past 4 months, his wife had not come to him like she usually did. Before, she would always be the one to come to him anytime she needs attention. But now, everything had changed. Christian had waited and waited, hoping she would come back to him on her own. He had stayed in his room every night, expecting to hear a knock on the door or her soft footsteps in the hallway. But nothing happened. Each day felt longer than the last. The silence between them had grown too wide. Now, Christian couldn't take it anymore. He missed her deeply, the way she smiled, the way she looked at him, and the way she made him feel wanted. He didn't want to wait any longer. Even though it hurt his pride, he knew it was better to take the first step this time. Vera opened her eyes the moment she heard footsteps coming into her room. When Christian entered, he saw her lying on the bed, but she wasn't asleep. As soon as their eyes met, she sat up straight. "What are you doing here?" she asked, trying to hide the mixture of surprise and confusion in her tone. Christian stepped further into the room. His eyes were soft, filled with a longing he had hidden for too long. "I came to be with my wife," he said quietly. He moved closer to the bed and slowly got on it, reaching out his hand to touch her. But before he could, Vera pulled away and shifted to the edge of the bed. "Please go back to your room, Chris," she said. "I'm not in the mood." Chris sighed deeply, pain flashing in his eyes. "But I'm in the mood, Vera," he said honestly. "I miss you. I need you." Vera turned to look at him with raised eyebrows, her face unreadable. "Why do you need me, if I may ask?" she said, clearly surprised by his words. Christian paused for a moment. This was the question he had been afraid of. He knew he had hurt her somehow, though she hadn't said it out loud. He could feel the distance she had placed between them, but he didn't understand everything behind it. Now, here he was, vulnerable, asking for something that used to come so easily to him. He looked into her eyes, searching for the right words. Vera's voice grew sharper. "I just told you to go back to your room." "Didn't you hear me?" she said, looking at him with cold eyes. Christian felt the sting of her words, but he didn't move. Instead, he sat there quietly, then whispered, "Please." "I'm sorry." Vera let out a bitter laugh and slowly stood up from the bed. She looked at him with disbelief. "Sorry? What exactly are you sorry for, Chris?" she asked, without waiting for an answer. She walked out of the room and headed to the sitting room. Christian hesitated for a moment, then followed her quietly. Vera sat on the couch and folded her arms tightly across her chest. Her eyes were already shining with tears, but her voice was strong. "Do you even know what you've done to me in this marriage?" she said. "Do you know how many nights I cried myself to sleep while you were busy ignoring me like I didn't matter?" Christian stood silently. "You never listen, Chris," she continued. "Whenever I tried to talk about how I felt, you shut me down. You made me feel like my emotions were too much. Like I was a burden." She wiped a tear from her cheek and looked away. "Do you remember how many times I begged you to spend time with me? To see me, to hear me? But you were always too tired, too busy, or just not interested. I felt invisible in my own home." Christian slowly walked toward her and sat on the edge of the couch, unsure if he should speak. His eyes were filled with regret. "Vera, I didn't know you felt all that. I know I wasn't the best husband, but I never meant to hurt you." She turned sharply to face him. That's the problem, Chris. You never meant to hurt me, but you did, over and over again. And every time, you said nothing or just acted like everything was normal. The room fell silent. Christian couldn't find the right words to say. All he knew was that she was right. Chris and Vera had been married for 3 years. When they first got together, Vera was full of joy and excitement. She had waited so long for the right man to come into her life. Many times, friends and family asked her why she was still single, but she remained patient. She had made a personal promise to herself: she would only give her heart and her body to the man she would marry. So when Chris came into her life, he seemed like the answer to all her prayers. On their wedding night, Vera gave herself to Chris for the first time. It was a big moment for her. She had kept her purity for years, waiting for the man who would value and cherish her. That night, Chris was amazed. He didn't just marry a beautiful woman, he discovered that she had saved herself just for him. It made him feel special, lucky, honored even. In those first few weeks, they were deeply in love. They shared everything: laughs, dreams, and even silent moments of peace. They couldn't keep their hands off each other. But after just 1 month, something changed. Chris slowly began to pull away. He stopped being as affectionate. The sweet good morning kisses, the long talks at night, and the thoughtful gestures, flowers, back rubs, surprise notes, all of it started to fade. He became quiet, distant. At first, Vera thought he was just stressed or tired, but as weeks turned into months, she noticed he barely looked at her the way he used to. When she spoke, he nodded without listening. When she reached out, he acted like he didn't notice. She tried to talk to him, but he always brushed it off. "I'm just tired, Vera. You're overthinking things," he would always say. Little by little, Vera felt like she was disappearing. The love that once filled their home now felt like a ghost of the past. And no matter how much she tried to fix things, by cooking his favorite meals, dressing up for him, being patient, it never seemed enough. She had married the man of her dreams, but he no longer treated her like the woman he once adored. Now, sitting in the quiet living room, Vera looked at Chris and said, "I gave you everything, Chris. My heart, my body, my trust. I was so happy to finally have someone to love and be loved by. But I don't even recognize us anymore." Chris lowered his head, his eyes filled with shame. The weight of her words hit him deeply. Chris's mind drifted back to the beginning of their marriage, back to the conversations he had with his 2 closest friends, Desmond and Alex. They were both married before him and acted like they knew everything about how a man should run his home. As soon as Chris got married, they took him aside one day and gave him what they called orientation. "Listen, Chris," Desmond had said, "don't make the mistake of pampering your wife too much. Women are not like us. If you give them too much love, they start acting like they are the boss of the house." Alex nodded in agreement. "You see this thing called attention," he said. "Don't give it freely. Let her work for it. Let her be the one chasing you. Not the other way around." Desmond leaned closer and lowered his voice. "And don't forget to let her know there are plenty of women out there who would happily take her place. That way, she'll always be careful not to misbehave. You have the upper hand, and she'll respect you more." Chris had nodded back then, unsure at first. But their words stayed with him. He began to believe them. He started to see his marriage like a game of power, a place where one person had to be in control, so he stopped being sweet. He stopped the little things that once made Vera feel loved. He thought if she missed him enough, she'd try harder. If he became less available, she'd chase him more. One night, as Vera was lying on the bed sleeping, Chris tapped her on the shoulder. "Vera," he said, "I think it's better if we start sleeping in separate rooms." Vera blinked in confusion. "What? Why would we do that, Chris? We're husband and wife." "What's going on?" Chris shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "I just think it'll help us have more space. If you need anything, you can always come to my room." Vera stared at him, speechless. She didn't understand it. They were newly married, wasn't this the time they should be even closer? But Chris didn't leave any room for argument. He had already made up his mind. With a heavy heart, Vera quietly packed her things and moved into another room. She didn't cry that night, but her heart felt like it was breaking slowly, and from there, her nightmare began. Chris hardly came to her room, not even to say good night. As if they were strangers sharing the same house. At first, Vera hoped he just needed time. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe something was wrong. But as the days turned into weeks, she saw that this was no phase, it had become a pattern. Every night, Vera lay in bed feeling unwanted. Alone. She missed the warmth of her husband beside her, the comfort of being touched and loved. But Chris never came. Not once. So she started going to him. Late at night, when the house was silent and her heart couldn't take the distance anymore, she would quietly walk to his room. She would slip into bed next to him, wrap her arms around him, and gently touch his chest, hoping for a sign of affection. Sometimes, Chris responded. He would touch her back, and they would make love in silence. Other times, he would turn to her and ask coldly, "What do you want? Is sex food? Please, I'm tired." Those words stung every time. They made her feel like a beggar, like someone trying to earn love she already deserved. She had given her whole heart to Chris, waited for him, trusted him. And now, she was the one chasing him, night after night, just for a little attention. She began to feel ashamed. Unwanted. Like a burden. Still, she stayed. She kept hoping something would change, that the man she fell in love with would return. But each time she went to him, it felt like she was losing a piece of herself. Why wouldn't Chris ask her what she wanted while he had already satisfied himself outside? Wasn't it obvious? Vera had found a pack of condom many times on his trousers while washing his work clothes. But she never questioned him, not even once. She seized all of his escapes, even though she often pretended not to. He would rather go to another woman outside his marriage to satisfy himself rather than be the first to come to his wife. And then, when she finally gathered the courage to knock on his door with trembling hands and a heart full of hope, he would look at her with eyes already emptied of desire, of love, of patience. "What do you want?" He would ask coldly, as if she were a stranger. Each time that question left his lips, something inside her cracked a little more. She'd turn around, and go back into herself, into that quiet, dark place she called her room. The tears never needed permission. They came anyway. She would bury her face in the pillow, soaking it with questions she didn't know how to ask. Was she not enough? Why did he marry her if he could so easily go to another? Why does he treat her like a burden when all she wants is to be close? She started doubting her entire existence, not just as a wife, but as a woman. Chris had a way of making her feel invisible, like she was just an object in the house, present but unwanted. Every cold shoulder, every dismissive glance, every night he didn't come home, or worse, came home smelling of perfume that wasn't hers, became evidence against her worth. But what hurt the most was that he never noticed her breaking. Not once did he stop to ask why she had grown so quiet. Why her laughter had disappeared. Why her hands trembled slightly whenever he walked by. He had no idea that love could starve, and Vera had been starving for a long time, and yet, even in that starvation, she waited. For a word. For a touch. For a sign that he still saw her. But Chris, in his pride, in his endless hunger for control and validation elsewhere, never reached back. Vera would sit in the silence after crying. Her hands clenched tightly, trying to decide if it was weakness or strength to keep staying. Was it love, or just the fear of being alone? The day Vera finally found the courage to ask him that one question that had burned in her throat for months: "Why do you prefer going to other women instead of coming to me?" She thought maybe she would get honesty. Maybe he would feel shame, but Chris didn't hesitate. He didn't stutter. He didn't even raise his voice. "If you don't know your job very well," he said with the confidence of a man who thought he was always right, "another woman will do it for you." Vera froze. She stared at him, her lips slightly parted, her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and pain. But he wasn't done. He adjusted his wristwatch, not even looking her in the eyes as he added, "Don't forget, so many women pray to be in your position." And that was the moment it dawned on her. Clearly, brutally. She was on a long thing. A very long, lonely, humiliating thing. There was no remorse in his voice. No regret. Just a warning cloaked in arrogance. That night, Vera didn't cry. Not because she didn't want to, but because something inside her had turned off. A switch. A light. A part of her that used to still hold on, still hope, still make excuses for his cruelty. She realized she was losing herself, not just slowly anymore, but in chunks. She was shrinking to fit into a version of womanhood that required her to be quiet while bleeding. To smile while being disrespected. To beg for attention that should have been hers freely, and still, she was expected to do more. Cook more. Pray more. Tolerate more. Please him more. Understand him more. Even when he gave her nothing to work with, she made up her mind. Chris no longer existed in her heart. He was just a man she shared walls with. A name on her documents. A shadow in her space. Nothing more. They would be housemates. That was all. From that night on, she stopped checking who he was calling. She stopped wondering why he came home late. She stopped waiting for him to touch her, or speak to her like a human being. She cooked what she wanted, dressed how she liked, laughed when she felt like it, and started pouring all her energy into her escape plan. Because Vera had a plan. She was leaving this country, and when she did, she would leave Chris behind, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, completely. Chris thought his words would sting her into submission. He thought Vera would break a little more, shrink further into the woman he believed he could control. He expected that after hearing his cold declaration, that another woman would do her job if she couldn't, she would start fighting for his attention again. But instead, she vanished from him, emotionally. She stopped asking when he'd be home. Stopped checking up on him when he stayed out late. The once constant "Where are you?" and "Hope you're okay" messages became a memory. She no longer hovered around him in the evenings, asking what he'd like to eat or how his day had gone. Now, dinner simply appeared on the table, whatever she felt like making. If he liked it, fine. If he didn't, the dustbin was nearby. At first, it irritated him, but he thought it would pass. What shook him most, though, was the silence in the bedroom. Vera no longer reached for him in the night. She no longer initiated anything. No soft hands on his chest. No shy kisses. No gentle pleas for intimacy like she used to. The same woman who once begged for his touch now rolled over and slept like he didn't exist. At first, he laughed it off. She would come back. After all, he was her first. She loved him. Needed him. She couldn't possibly go that long without craving him. But 1 month passed. Then 2, 3, on the 4th month, something shifted in Chris. The laughter stopped. The arrogance began to peel away, layer by layer. He started watching her. Really watching her. How she moved through the house like he wasn't even there. How she smiled more when she was on the phone with friends or when she was alone in the kitchen. How her silence was no longer sad, but peaceful. That scared him. He realized it wasn't just distance. It was detachment, and when night fell again, and she walked past him in her silk nightgown without even a glance, that was when it finally hit him. Vera had changed. The woman who once waited for his scraps of attention had found something deeper, herself. And now, she had nothing left to beg him for. Chris sat on the edge of the bed that night, torn between his bruised ego and his rising panic. And that was when he swallowed his pride. He rose slowly, and went to her himself. But now, he just realized he had hurt her so deep. "Chris, I'm done with this marriage," Vera said with tears in her eyes. Chris was shocked. He couldn't believe what she just said. "Please, Vera, I'm very sorry for everything I've done to you," he begged. "My friends gave me wrong advice. They told me if I treated you that way, you would pay more attention to me and obey me. I didn't mean to hurt you. I promise to be a better husband from today," but Vera had already made up her mind. She was tired and didn't want to continue. "Let's get a divorce, Chris," she said firmly, and just like that, Chris destroyed their peaceful marriage with his own hands. A few weeks later, Vera left the country. Chris was left alone, full of regret, wishing he could go back in time and fix his mistakes.